Hello, and welcome to the public meeting of the DC Lodge. I'm so happy you could join us today. And as always, I invite you to read out the invocation loud to increase the vibration, and then I will introduce our speaker. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. Today, we have a young member from our Florida lodge who also attends the DC lodge meetings. His name is Dominic Bucci, and he's a federal civil contractor who has shifted his focus to studying psychology and working with those who suffer from addiction. He's a lifelong seeker of wisdom and a member of the Theosophical Society since 2020. And with that, I'm handing it over to you, Dominic, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Suzanne. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. We'll go and we'll get started. We're going to talk today about the diamond. What is the diamond? From the moment of birth until we leave our mortal bodies, a good being is assigned to us, watching over and supporting all our efforts to draw down the divine into matter, and so make matter sublime. This being has been known by many names throughout history: fate, destiny, character, the portion of our soul that doesn't vanish at our death. The diamond is a guardian spirit and guide that is assigned individually to a person prior to birth, and possibly even resides with the soul throughout the totality of its many earthly incarnations. It exists as an intermediary between humankind and the divine, and offers protection, advice, and direction. The diamond is not defined by its morality, but by its agency. It has existed in various forms across all the world's cultures since the beginning of recorded history. The diamond is also defined as an intermediary being, building a living bridge between man caught in matter and the eternal star that is assigned to him at birth. Curiously, in the West, it most often takes shape and form as an individualized being, as we here in the West place a primary focus on reason, logic, differentiation, and individuation, whereas in the East, it is often found to be more of a cumulative force, a representation of nature and collective harmony. In the East, it is often almost always seen to be positive, life-giving, and benevolent, whereas in the West, it is often positive, but it can also be neutral, and at times, negative versions have existed. This is interestingly somewhat representative of our differences between our societies and cultures. These differences between East and West, which are possibly then reflected back into this concept as we understand it. The psychologist Carl Jung commented, "It could be said of all of the Orient that at least until very recently, it has not tried to dominate nature, but to respect its laws and to understand them, to give them meaning. Nevertheless, it has no sense of persona. It only knows the archetype." In Western civilization, one of the most famous early depictions of the diamond occurs in Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Homer presents the diamond as both a guiding spirit and a spinner of fate that creates obstacles for Odysseus to overcome. In this discussion, we are primarily going to focus on the Western evolution of the diamond. But before we start out on this path, I'm going to mention briefly some other perspectives related to the diamond's presence in Eastern culture. In Buddhism, the concept of the Yidam is the meditational deity that arises through the intention of awakening in a form that helps beings free themselves from the vicissitudes of samsara. Yidam is also sometimes translated by the term tutelary deity or daimon. In Hinduism, in the Bhagavad Gita, it states in chapter 13, verse 22, the Atman, the self, is the intelligence, the ruler, the support, the witness, the enjoyer, and also the permitter. The daimon can be represented by the Atman, which can be further identified in the Rig Veda, where the Atman is defined as the pervading principle, the organism in which other elements are united, and the ultimate sentient principle. In the Mundaka Upanishad, the daimon can be further identified with the allegory of the two birds. In Islam, the concept of the Quran appears and is reminiscent of the Greek daimons and the Christian guardian angel. In pre-Islamic Arabian myth, the Quran is said to inspire poets for their works. Quran means constant companion. It is believed that for each person in the human realm, there exists a Quran in the parallel jinn realm, and it is the Quran who knows the character. In Taoism, a correlation with the daimon is not as straightforward. It could take the form of the Tao itself or a central concept, such as Wu Wei. The theologian Robert Neville has done substantial work to reconcile the Tao and the daimon in his book of the same name. Something that I have noticed in researching the daimon across cultures is that in the West, where the focus is more on individualism and rationalism, the daimon has both negative and positive connections. But in the East, where the emphasis is more on collectivism and the interconnectedness of all things, the daimon has only positive correlations. While very insightful to view the daimon in Eastern religious and philosophical traditions, such a wide overview would be beyond what we could accomplish here in this discussion. And for this reason, we'll switch back to the starting point in Western understanding of the daimon and continue by starting with the Greeks. Before the Greeks, at the beginnings of Western civilization in Mesopotamia, the Chaldeans had a rich spiritual tradition, but did not focus on the concept of ascension, regeneration, or enlightenment. The Chaldean mage did not worry about ascending into the heavens through theurgy. Spiritual actions were valued for their immediate effects, with no thought of recreating any bond with a distant primordial creator god. Prior to the belief in the immortality of the soul, it was a common belief outside of the mystery traditions that the soul, when it left its body at the moment of death, was grasped by the wind and diffused in all directions into the sky. It can be argued that prior to a culture developing the ideas of ascension, enlightenment, and reincarnation, the daimon doesn't exist internally within. Prior to this milestone, the escaping from the physical boundaries of existence, the focus was on individual life and the problems at hand, gaining favor, warding off spirits, and gaining protection from evil influences. The daimon first emerged in the 8th century BC, but most likely existed before, as it was noted in recorded history. An interesting note, in Zoroastrianism, a similar concept and understanding known as the Fravashi emerged in Persia independently as a form of convergent evolution at the same time and underwent a similar evolution to the daimon. Something important to point out for our discussion, psyche in Greek translates to soul. So when we talk about the soul or the psyche, you could go either way. And daimon in Latin translates to genius. So often in the era of the Roman Empire, you'll hear genius, especially when you read the works of Marcus Aurelius, his Meditations, you'll hear where he mentions genius, but he's speaking of the daimon. The beliefs of the early Greeks did not recognize the psyche or soul as immortal outside of the mystery traditions. Homer's epics did not represent a full-fledged concept of immortality. The afterlife depicted in the realms of Hades did not see the soul as a separate entity from the physical body. Immortality was a special status, and it was reserved for heroes or individuals with exceptional qualities. Likewise, the early Daimon was separate from the body and equated to external deities or spirits influencing individuals. This began to change with Socrates, who had constant contact with his Daimon, but it would not be until Plato's theory of the soul, which included the concept of an immaterial, immortal part of the soul, which was distinct from the physical body. With Socrates and Plato, the idea of the personal Daimon becomes part of the historical record, and most likely the notion had already been around for quite some time. Before Socrates, we had some of the pre-Socratic philosophers who addressed this. Pythagoras, he stated that the whole world, the whole air is full of souls. We call them daimons, and it is they who send dreams, signs, and illnesses to men. Heraclitus, 2,500 years ago, stated that character is destiny, and that character for a human is his daimon. This idea will come full circle from where we will travel with this concept, because this has also been the conclusion reached by the modern psychologist James Hillman in his famous book, The Soul's Code. There was not yet space in humankind for the daimon as it is known. People were still knowing the basic structure of the immediate world. Socrates. Socrates, who is credited with founding Western philosophy, experienced one of the most earliest recorded relationships with the daimon. He was in constant contact since childhood with a being that he called his daimonic sign. This inner voice wasn't something he got access to through conscious practice or spiritual devotion or any type of religious ritual. Socrates' daimon appeared as an inner voice of dialogue that frequently warned him against potential mistakes or harmful actions. His daimon did not tell him what to do, only what to avoid. It acted as a kind of internal veto. Socrates' daimon and the manner in which it acted is present throughout Plato's works, the Socratic dialogues. Its only mode of operation was to ensure that Socrates did not stray from the path assigned to him by the gods. Socrates' frequent references to his daimon were the origin of the charges brought against him ultimately by the state of Athens in 399 BC. The Socratic dialogue Apologia by Plato details Socrates' trial for impiety, and corruption that centered around Socrates not believing in the gods in whom the city believed, instead favoring his daimon. And another interesting fact about Socrates is he did not attend to any of the mystery traditions, especially the Eleusinian mysteries. He was asked, and that was very strange of someone of status not to go through the initiatic orders at that time. Socrates was condemned to death and forced suicide, and despite being given an opportunity to escape, he decided instead to drink the poison hemlock and accept his sentence. Socrates' daimon made sure that Socrates fulfilled the pattern of his faith, the significant destiny that it was, for he inspired the entire Western philosophical tradition. Socrates' daimon would oppose him in even trivial things, but an interesting thing to note, it was completely absent from him during his trial. Socrates stated, a daimon's task is to interpret and convey human things to the gods and divine things to humans. Being in the middle, the daimon can supplement each. God does not mix with them, but through the daimonic, all association, all converse comes between the gods and men, whether sleeping or awake. It was therefore with Socrates that the daimon began a major shift in the concept from occult forces that took hold of people in mysterious ways and then made them act under its influence, resulting in a happy or miserable life, to a guide that worked to keep the soul from straying from the assigned path. Socrates had made a conscious bond with his inner guide, and whereas previously the daimon was experienced only as a source outside of a person's control, as a blow of fate or a run of good luck, Socrates experienced it as an inner intimate relationship. Socrates' guidance on how to achieve communion with one's daimon was to comprehend the gods in the deeds they perform and in the world that surrounds us, rather than waiting for them to reveal themselves. Plato. Socrates' most famous pupil was Plato, and he developed the notion of a personal daimon who predicts who protects the individual during this life and guides him into the life to come, and is actually the superior divine part of the soul. He introduced the philosophical idea of deifying all beings through a direct personal bond with the divine, and identified the soul as a tripartite by dividing the psyche into three distinct parts and explaining that the psyche existed before and after life on earth, undergoing reincarnation until it achieved a state of purity. Through Plato, reality is made unreal in favor of the incorporeal, unchangeable other world, which is to be regarded as primary. The ego is concentrated in an immortal soul, which is alien to the body and captive in it. With Plato, for the first time in Greek philosophy, the truth and ontological reality shifted outside of corporeal reality. Plato developed the concept of the soul in Phaedrus with the allegory of the chariot, the concept that divided the soul into three distinct parts: the charioteer or driver and the two horses pulling the chariot. And an interesting note is this concept of the chariot, this allegory, appears all throughout many different initiatic traditions, many different wisdom schools. Those of us who study Gurdjieff knows that Gurdjieff included this also. So it's interesting to see this used all throughout. The chariot containing the driver and the horses are a composite soul, with the charioteer representing the logos, or the force that makes us reflect. A noble horse represents the timos, or the force that makes us aspire, and an unruly horse represents eros, or the force that makes us desire. Eros is driven by the sensual impressions of the world and our bodily appetites. Timos is driven by social norms and expectations like courage, ambition, honor, and logos is the pure capacity for mental reflection, but can generate nothing by itself. It can only process the data provided by the eros and timos. The success of the tripartite soul relies on the harmonious interaction of all the soul's components. The horses further represent the twofold daimonic presence within each human being. We can all recall the often seen devil and angel images on the shoulder of the individuals in the cartoons of our childhood. And when I was studying this, that image kept popping in my head. The higher part of the soul above and in contact with the logos is the nous. Its function is to be unbiased and to understand nature beyond the limitations of illusory reality in an undistorted way, remaining pure and untouched. Whereas the logos receives its sense impressions filtered through the eros and the timos, it also receives undistorted information from the nous, which intuitively provides us with a higher form of insight. The nous was often understood as the divine or spiritual assistance that humans receive to help comprehend reality, acting as a living spiritual force that draws true reasoning from flawed perceptions. The function of the nous in the human soul is to unite the ephemeral nature of matter with the eternal spirit behind it. When the nous was recognized and integrated into the tripartite concept of the soul, this opened up space for the daimon to exist and emerge separate from the mental functions of the being. According to Plato, nous was implanted in man as something divine, as a daimon in man. The charioteer, the driver, must tame the horses to hear the voice of its daimon. This is something that is so important. We must learn how to handle the world's distractions to establish this contact with our daimon, with our higher self. Plato located the daimon inside the soul, being identified with its upper part, which is immortal and divine. It represents at the same time an ideal status to which the human soul aspires, to insofar as it tends to escape the state of servitude and disequilibrium to which its mortal parts hold it. He herein defined the daimon as an equivalent to the divine part of the human soul, or the nous. Plato stated, as concerning the most sovereign form of soul in us, we must conceive that heaven has given it to each man as a daimon, that part which we say dwells in the summit of our body and lifts us from earth towards our celestial affinity. Like a plant whose roots are not in the earth, but in the heavens, the diamond of the nous can be understood as the part of the soul that stands as mediator between the earthly realm and the celestial sphere, a living spiritual chain that connects man to his eternal higher self. By deifying the nous, Plato laid the foundation for the philosophical and occult tradition that knows of a personal and immortal divine being assigned to us and watching over each man and every woman. Plato discussed the diamond in many of his dialogues, but the most clearly defined case is found in the Republic and at the back of the book in the myth of Ur. The myth of Ur. A soldier named Ur has been presumed to have died in battle, and he awakens after 12 days on his funeral pyre, and he tells his journey into the afterlife. This includes information about reincarnation, the astral plane, and the diamond. Ur awakens and finds himself in a vast meadow filled with souls. Ur sees two openings leading in and out of the sky, and two leading in and out of the ground. Judges sit between these two openings and judge souls based on their lives, and then order souls on which path to follow. The good are guided into the sky, and the immoral are directed below. When it is Ur's turn to approach the judges, he is told to remain, to listen, and to observe, in order to report his experience back to humankind. Ur watches as souls return from out of both the sky and the ground. From the sky, the souls return and recount beautiful sights, wondrous things. From the underground, the souls return haggard, dirty, tired, and crying in despair, recounting horrible experiences, as each was required to pay tenfold the penalty for all the wicked deeds committed when alive. After several days in the meadow, the souls were required to travel farther. And after some more days, they reached a place where they could see a brilliantly bright shaft of rainbow light that extended upwards into the sky and resembled a giant spindle for spinning thread. Described it as having orbits representing the celestial spheres that each created a perfect circle around it. This was the spindle of necessity, and present around it was Lady Necessity and her daughters, the Fates. The souls were organized into rows and were selected according to a lottery to come forward and choose his or her next life. Witnessed that a man who had not known the terrors of the underground, but had been rewarded in the sky, hastily chose a powerful dictatorship. And upon further inspection of this life, this man was going to commit many atrocities. Observed that this was often the case of those who had been through the path in the sky, whereas those who had been punished often chose a better life. What interests us in this myth deals with the step that precedes the reincarnation of the soul. Plato underscores the fact that each soul has to choose a diamond which will accompany it during its new life until its next reincarnation. Based on the choice of this life, each soul was assigned a guardian spirit, a diamond, to help him or her through life. Each soul was then required to drink some of the water in varying quantities as Ur watched. As they drank, each soul forgot everything. As they lay down at night to sleep, each soul was lifted up into the night in various directions for rebirth. Completing their journey, remembered nothing of his own journey back to his body. He opened his eyes to find himself lying on the funeral pyre early in the morning, able to recall his journey through the afterlife. So for Plato, we have the enduring ideas that diamonds are mediators between gods and humans, and that everyone has a personal diamond guiding them through life. When the idea of the human soul as immortal emerged, there was then a separation of the lower self and aspiring to the higher, and space for the diamond to actually exist. When we decided that we were more than a corporeal, the diamond could then exist within us. This is the birth of a hope beyond this one life and the beginnings of an understanding of a higher self beyond the lower ego. When we can appreciate the diamond and find him in history, in mythology, philosophy, psychology, and religion, then we have created the space for contact. It is the means creating the end. Neoplatonic ideas of the diamond. After Plato, about 600 years later, his Platonic ideas eventually transformed into Neoplatonic thought. brought about by many world changes, not the least of which was Alexander's conquests that brought about a cultural exchange and fusion of many different traditions of wisdom. While acknowledging Plato's concept of forms, which are perfect, unchanging ideals that exist beyond the physical world, the Neoplatonists introduced the concept of the One, which is an ultimate source of reality that transcends even the forms. The One overflows and gives rise to the lesser levels of reality, including the forms and the physical world. And this played a crucial role in solidifying the concept of a spiritual hierarchy, of which the diamond played an important part. According to the Neoplatonic philosopher Socrates, the wider the gap is between our nature and the first God, the more powers must be there between us and him. Between this inaccessible God and us, the intermediaries multiply, and these are agents of an ascension towards God. One of the aspects of Neoplatonism is to understand the nature and function of the diamond that was inherited from Platonic thought. Plotinus is considered the founder of Neoplatonism, and his Enneads contain this philosophy. He specifically referenced the diamond in Ennead number 3, Treatise 4. It was titled On the Allotted Diamond. This anecdote from Porphyry suggests that the power of one's soul is the result of the rank of one's diamond. Plotinus puts emphasis on the fact that the diamond is to be found within the soul itself, and it is that which lies immediately superior to the motive force in our life. We choose the principle that stands above us according to our choice of life. So if we are on an upward path of our soul's progress, the diamond is active in helping us guide us upward. And if we are stagnating, it may offer some prodding. However, if we are regressing, it can be absent completely, leaving us instead to deal with the universal laws that are in place. The diamond shows us the way that has to be followed, and it leads us to the kind of life that is just above the kind of life we have adopted at the present moment, to the place that it currently sits. What is interesting about Plotinus's explanation of the diamond being immediately above us is that when magicians have willfully established contact with the diamond, they have been told by it, after decades of blindness, you have finally managed to look above your head. Plotinus states that if a man is able to follow the diamond which is above him, he comes to be above himself, living that diamond's life, and giving the preeminence to the better part of himself to which he is being led. We are always being led in the higher direction. According to Plotinus, our choices and free will come down to really only one choice, and all other life events that unfold are the result of this choice. This is to either pay attention to the world of the senses or to the nominal world. We choose what power is active in our soul. The operating principles that are derived from this demonstrate our true will. True will as different from our understanding of free will. True will is derived from the unveiled or unobstructed desire of our soul, the will as it is in the higher dimension of its dwelling. What we would consider free will in the traditional sense is, according to Plotinus, only our choice in our general disposition that we have towards our lives, not in what occurs. Plotinus continued the diamond's evolution by stating that we choose the principle which stands above us according to the choice of life, and then the diamond ensures the fulfillment of these choices. Destiny is sealed from birth by the choice that has been made before. Plotinus says that the diamond directs during the course of our mortal life, because he is given to us to help us accomplish our destiny. Plotinus also states that the diamond continues to guide the soul after death, and this understanding correlates with some of the modern information. For example, in Michael Newton's book, Journey of Souls, it's replete with the guides following and even participating in the time of life between life. Plotinus further explains in his doctrine of the undescended soul that a portion of the soul remains in the higher realms. Plotinus hints on a larger concept here that is outside of this present discussion, but one that deserves at least a mention. The diamond is, therefore, at the same time inside and outside the soul. The exteriority or inferiority of all levels of reality is, in fact, a matter of perception. A higher level of reality is thus external, wider than ourselves. What he is saying here is that when the soul descends into the body, The body is not even large enough to contain the descending portion, so it is extended into our external environment. Our soul is a portion of our immediate surrounding environment, a living reality. Plotinus's most famous student related a time in Rome when a visiting Egyptian priest told Plotinus that he could summon Plotinus's diamond and make it appear externally. The Egyptian priest invited Plotinus to the temple of Isis to perform the conjuration. The priest succeeded in making Plotinus's diamond appear. When the diamond was summoned to appear, a god came, and not a being of the daimonic order. And the Egyptian said, "Blessed are you, who have a god for your diamond, and not a companion of the subordinate order." 50 years after Plotinus, Iamblichus, one of the last great Neoplatonic philosophers before Christianity took over, further built upon Plotinus's work and established a further tripartition of the diamond into good, punishing, and evil, with Christianity only seizing upon the latter to define them all. One of my theories is that at the time of Iamblichus, the foundation discussed had been firmly established to bring the chariot of the soul completely under control, to lend an ear to the call of the diamond, and to create gods of men with this knowledge, understanding, and the practical applications of theurgy. However, the rise of Christianity was to ensure that this kind of individual empowerment was not yet to be realized. Proclus, who lived 400 years after the birth of Christ, crucially transmitted an elaborate and fully developed system of Neoplatonic philosophy from late antiquity into the Middle Ages. He characterized the diamond as a mediating entity that ensured the cohesion of the cosmos by communicating life and ideas into the material world, and assigning the diamond the rank that binds together divine and mortal, transmits channels from above, and elevates all secondary beings to gods. Its function was the ascent of the soul. Proclus further advanced the diamond by separating it from the nous, stating that humans had confused it with a character of the intellect when it was in fact a separate spiritual being existing on the level of souls. Proclus stated that to place the diamond as a part of the soul was to excessively admire the life of men and deny them their proper divine importance. Proclus also stated that one who has exercised the best part of himself during his life becomes after death a diamond. This is interesting because this lines up with something I came across in Robert Monroe, the famous out-of-body traveler and founder of the Monroe Institute. In his last novel, Ultimate Journey, he described his guide, which he termed his InSpec, and that stood for an acronym, Intelligent Species. And this was his guide that took him around and showed him a lot of things and taught him a lot of things. What he found out at the end was that that was actually him. He was guiding himself. His guide was his higher self, his future self. I think this is interesting to point out because this lines up with what Proclus was saying here all these years ago. And then, of course, the diamond in astrology. An interesting note to explain is how significant the concept of the diamond was in antiquity. Astrology, which was widely practiced and accepted, had a significant part of the astrological chart devoted to the lot of diamond and tying the diamond to one's fortune. The idea of a personal diamond, both discernible in the chart and even for some responsible for the particular arrangement of the heavenly bodies and relevant points within the chart. These places gave astrologers a constant reminder of the diamond. Whenever they looked at a chart, this has fallen out of practice in modern astrology. However, recently a resurgence in Hellenistic astrology has emerged, and this is beginning to be discussed and included in some circles again. The rise of Christianity. Today's connotation of a demon only as an evil spirit has replaced earlier connotations as a divine force. I favor Daimon, and if you notice in the intro to this presentation, it was Daimon. I favor Daimon, although both Daimon and Daimon both are correct. It's based on the spin that Christianity has placed on the concept. By making it demon, it's so similar to the diamond and can often be confusing when you look at it. What comes to mind when you hear that word? I therefore switch to the diamond. Before the present interpretation of the demon, as far back as the Chaldean oracles, Daimons referenced 4 types of beings: nature spirits, Platonic daimons, or beings that mediate between gods and men, angels who perform the same function, and the evil demon, which is a disruptive and distractive force, and which Christianity used to overshadow the whole understanding with this one classification. It took some years after the birth of Christ for Christianity to gain a firm foothold and supplant the pagan polytheistic beliefs that had existed for at least 2,000 years. This occurred in 312 AD when the Roman Emperor Constantine took power. But what is an interesting lesser known fact is that there was such a struggle at that time between early Christianity and the pagan faith, the polytheistic, the gods, is that shortly after Constantine, an emperor named Julian came to power, and Julian switched everything back to the polytheistic religions. However, as soon as his rule was up, it converted right back to Christianity again. The ancient traditions at that time had lost their strength, and after Julian's rule in 363 AD, everything switched back to Christianity and would stay this way. The reasons for the church's demonization of the daimon are manifold, amongst which are that Christianity is monotheistic. The daimon occupied an ambiguous space that conflicted with an all-powerful singular deity. By demonizing the daimon, it served to completely delegitimize the traditional belief systems by describing our intermediary guiding spirits as the only forces of evil striving for corruption of the soul, tempting humans to commit sinful actions. Contact with them became heresy. Being contacted by them was possession. The guardian and guiding intermediary of our soul for the first 2,000 years now became off limits. And so our personal, individual connection with the divine was severed. The church was the only intermediary permitted, and with this forced understanding, our souls became full of sin and our personal powers lost. My personal theory is that we got very close to something special and powerful, a personal open contact that was available to all humans and the divine, between humans and the divine, and this was changed to be able to control the masses. The fall from the mainstream of the Socratic and Neoplatonic traditions occurred when Constantine I came to power, and about the same time, the libraries of Alexandria were burned and destroyed. The wisdom was diffused outward, with much of it being transferred to Sufism. The concept of the daimon can be viewed here through Henri Corbin's The Man of Light in Iranian Sufism. It's an excellent book for seeing that from an Islamic perspective. The wisdom was also diffused underground in the West, and it was held by the Gnostics, the Hermetics, the alchemists, ultimately the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and Theosophists. I would make the argument that the daimon has further evolved. It needs to be reinterpreted now. The daimon can represent the angelic beings of Christianity in a sort of way that stimulates the ascent of the soul. The perceived evil daimon, or demon, as it is now known, is in actuality more than a counteracting force working against the ascent of the soul. It's a punitive force that applies to an erring human the sharpness of fire in an attempt to torment a soul sensible, an avenging demon who wounds the evil person for the lawless deeds until such a person eventually ceases longing after insatiable appetites and struggling in the dark without satisfaction. This tortures the erring human and makes him grow and eventually evolve, heading into the upward direction out of logical necessity. The positiveness of this aspect is completely lost in the West at large until we arrive at Jung's psychology of the shadow and the process of individuation. With church doctrine, the demon was to be avoided at all costs as only something of the devil. So with fear instead of knowledge of daimons, the church cut us off from the non-physical realms from whence we came, and a part of still of us resides, forcing us to ignore this part and squarely focus on that which is most corruptible, matter and illusions. The Socratic tradition centered around the importance of questioning, the examination of one's belief, the pursuit of knowledge, and the importance of dialogue, and all this thinking was declared heresy by the church, so it had to go underground. The rise of Christianity pushed it out of mainstream and into the taboo. However, in Christian mysticism and ceremonial magic, it became known as the holy guardian angel, until it again began to gain some popular traction in both the New Age and modern psychology. After Christianity and into the Renaissance. It is interesting that modern historians don't like to use the term Dark Ages any longer because they believe that it doesn't accurately portray the time period from the fall of the Western Roman Empire. This is around 476 AD until around 1000 AD, the High Middle Ages, and ultimately the start of the Renaissance. But taking just this concept of the diamond as an example, it is virtually non-existent during this span of time. The scarcity of the concept was supplemented also by the medieval Inquisition. One thing to note that during this time, when the early Gnostics debated the early Christians and before Christianity won out and was adopted by the Roman Empire, the Gnostics had translated the concept of the diamond into the idea of the divine spark that resides within each of us and the well-known idea of the higher self. During the Proto-Renaissance, beginning in the 1200s, things started to pop again regarding the idea surrounding the diamond. Alchemy emerged out of Arabia when Arabic alchemical texts were translated into Latin. The Corpus Hermeticum was translated from ancient Greek to Latin by Marsilio Ficino in 1463. And the important text that emerged during this time was a book entitled The Book of Abramelin. This grimoire outlines a system of magic attributed to an Egyptian mage named Abramelin. The book itself is an autobiography written by Abraham of Worms, who supposedly traveled to Egypt to learn from Abramelin. The system of magic combines Hermetic theurgy with Jewish Kabbalah. It presented a program of self-purification and initiation, whose goal is the attainment of contact with the diamond, now called the Holy Guardian Angel. This text, or a version of this text, has been a cornerstone of modern magical theory and has gained great notoriety after the emergence of the Golden Dawn in the late 1800s. Something to mention here too, this is so important to the Golden Dawn system of magic and ascension that they consider this a critical main step of the whole entire practice. And without this, without establishing this contact with the Holy Guardian Angel, the diamond, you can't move to the upper levels. The diamond now transitioned into modern practical occultism as the angel. This was related to the substantial indirect influence that the Abrahamic religions and their cosmo-conceptions had on Neoplatonism as it lay dormant, Neoplatonism as it lay dormant. What cannot be overlooked, and I personally feel is greatly taken for granted, is that along with the rise of Romanticism and individualism, religious freedom contributed greatly for the resurgence of modern paganism and the New Age. When I've been studying this throughout history, it is absolutely amazing how much persecution took place. And it really made me reconsider how much freedom we have now to believe, worship, practice any way we want. I realized that I had took that for granted when I saw this. Back then, there were only a few brave souls that had the courage to salvage and preserve these traditions under extreme persecution and even death. Now we get to theosophy. Theosophy and the diamond. About the same period of time as the Golden Dawn was founded, Madame Blavatsky and Henry Olcott founded the Theosophical Society. In keeping with the angel, Madame Blavatsky ties the concept of the diamond into the Daimon Shohan. Daimon Shohan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this can be found in the following passages from The Secret Doctrine. Blavatsky says, the invisible deity is thus also the Daimon Shohan. It steps into man. A Daimon Shohan has to become one. He cannot be born or appear suddenly on the plane of life as a full-blown angel, failing which it will forever be impossible to understand the metaphysical and purely psychic and even physiological relations between the Daimon Shohans or angels on one plane and humanity on the other. The day when the spark will re-become the flame, man will merge with his Daimon Shohan. Blavatsky and all those above quotes are directly, all those words are directly from Blavatsky and the Secret Doctrine. Blavatsky advanced the understanding of the Daimon concept so far forward that it includes moving from guide and guardian to ultimately merging it with the lower self. This is one of the two theories that I'm seeing advanced now. The body actually has an alchemical furnace that is capable of fusing the lower and higher self into one being that is fully conscious in the material realm. Carl Jung and the Daimon. From the age of approximately 12, Carl Jung had identified that he was made up of more than one person. He identified these separately as personality number 1 and personality number 2. Personality number 1 was the schoolboy, and personality number 2 he identified as the other. Jung stated, the play and counterplay between personalities number 1 and number 2 has run through my whole life, has nothing to do with a split or disassociation in the ordinary medical sense. On the contrary, it is played out in every individual. In my life, number 2 has been of prime importance, and I have always tried to make room for anything that wanted to come to me from within. He is a typical figure, but he is perceived only by the very few. Most people's conscious understanding is not sufficient to realize that he is also what they are. A lot of human confusion comes when we are unable to recognize the different conception of persons within ourselves and wrongly believe that we are one being. This error of identification keeps us in perpetual inner conflict and also from contact with our Daimon. Jung stated, one of the activities that is central to waking up is the process of transforming the Daimon from an uncontrolled force of nature into a power that is yours to command. Part of becoming awake is getting wise to what is going on inside. When we start to look within, we discover our own inner city, that host of energies that lives within us. Some of them, like the Daimon, are autonomous, possessed of an energy that transcends our conscious drives, needs, and desires, beyond what our ego can control or direct. With time, conscious effort, and attention, we can get to know the Daimon, come to feel more kindly disposed towards it, and thus draw upon its benefits. Jung would come into full contact with his Daimon and identify it as Philemon. There, we could do a whole discussion on Jung and his Daimon, but there is something that is very interesting that is in Jung's letters that I want to point out to really bring this home. The Daimon became a central part of Jung's thinking about vocation, motivation, creativity, and the individual's potential for achieving fulfillment in life. Additionally, in Jung's collection of letters, he wrote a letter to the author Hermann Hesse. After he had read Hesse's book, Daimon, the book tells the story of a young man who was guided and protected his entire life by a character, a friend named Daimon. Upon close and astute reading, you realize that Hesse's character is his Daimon. Jung knew this, and as he had a personal friendship with Hesse, he wrote him a letter after reading it that was included, interestingly enough, in the addenda to Jung's first volume of letters, making it stand out amongst the other letters. What they said that they had received it late, so they put it in the back. And of course, that drew me to it. In it, Jung tells Hesse, and I quote, I could tell you a little secret about Daimon, of which you became the witness, but whose meaning you have concealed from the reader. I have long been a good friend of Daimon's, and he has recently initiated me into his private affairs under the deepest secrecy. I take this to be a veiled indication that Jung was in full open contact with his Daimon, as was Hesse. And I think this could possibly even be to the degree of Socrates. Jung was really good in the way he would separate his stuff so it would be plausible to the scientific community. And he really pulled his punches on some of these inner truths. This is an interesting theory that we're just going to briefly discuss, bicameral mind theory. Originally, the very early Greek idea of the Daimon did not describe a particular category of spiritual beings, but rather a mode of activity. Being under the influence of a Daimon meant being in a certain state of being. There may have been a good reason for this. the very early understanding of the diamond, because that was actually how it was only available, not just a primitive understanding. The psychologist Julian Jaynes proposed that early humans lacked modern awareness, that lacked modern self-awareness, and relied on external voices for guidance. He proposed that around 3,000 years ago, this system broke down, leading to the development of internal consciousness as we know it. Jaynes used historical text and archaeological evidence to suggest that people interpreted external voices as divine commands. This early mental state functioned as two chambers of the brain, an executive part called God and a follower part called man. There is an interesting correlation to this theory and the evolution of the diamond from an external understanding amongst early pre-Socratic Greeks that then moved into internal guidance as space was made and man evolved. An interesting thing, again, back to Monroe on this, in one of Monroe's books, I remember coming across a story where he traveled out of body and witnessed a past life experience that he came into, and it was regarding building the pyramids. And when he was building the pyramids, it was terribly hard labor. He mentioned that he wasn't a single person, a single consciousness. The consciousness at that time was grouped. It was almost hive consciousness that he was experiencing. So in other words, a group of slaves was sharing one consciousness. And I find that very interesting, and this actually ties into this bicameral mind theory with Jaynes. And the bicameral mind theory is something that we could have a whole discussion on too. And then we're going to wrap it up with James Hillman and the Soul's Code. Hillman developed the theory. Hillman was a modern psychologist after Jung. He was active from the 60s. He passed away, I believe, in 2010 or 2012. He founded archetypal psychology, but he wrote a book called The Soul's Code that dealt with the diamond, specifically with the diamond. It became very popular at the time. He was even on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And what he did is he took this concept, he brought it back out into the mainstream, but he veiled it in such a way. He developed a theory called the acorn theory. It's a concept suggesting that each person comes into the world with a unique calling, or a diamond, which is like an acorn that contains the potential for the full-grown oak tree. Just as the acorn contains all the information it needs to grow into an oak, each person contains all the information they need to fulfill their unique purpose in life. Hillman believed that the acorn theory is a way to understand the mystery of human individuality. He argued that it is not enough to explain human behavior in terms of nature or nurture alone. There is something else, something unique to each person that shapes who they are and what they are meant to do. The soul of each of us is given a unique diamond before we are born, selected as an image or pattern that we live on earth. The soul companion, the diamond, guides us here. In the process of arrival, however, we forget all that took place and believe we come into this world empty. The diamond remembers what is in your image and belongs to your pattern, and therefore your diamond is the carrier of your destiny. That's a quote from Hillman. I think that is it. I'll tell you, I wanted to mention just one thing that's interesting to bring this home. There's a psychologist named William Bloom, who was a member of Feinhorn, the Feinhorn community. And he actually practiced that Abramelin ritual when he was young. When he was in 1972, he was in his 20s. He went with his girlfriend to Morocco and spent 6 months in the mountains practicing that ritual to the T. And what he came up with, and this is a quote from him, he said, "When I teach people how to perceive and attune to other presences, such as the angelic, I try to help them reach a state of carefully focused attention, while at the same time staying perfectly relaxed and playful, so that they can be open to impression. To perceive these other realities, to be fully open to understanding one's intuitive sensitivity, we need to be focused but relaxed. Once I was calm and open, the angel could communicate with me." The reason why this is so significant is sometimes we get into such focused meditation or such seriousness in our work, even when it's spiritually related. And when he had done that, he was unable to facilitate the communication and actually had given up at the end of a 6-month ritual. And then he got a voice in his head, and it was his diamond, his angel. And it said, come back into the oratory. You need to relax. You need to be playful. And then he was able to establish contact. Thank you.
Well, Dominic, this was amazing. I am so impressed and so much useful information in such a short time. It was unbelievable, and I will have to listen to it again. I mean, there are so many things I would like to address, but I want others to give a chance. But I love Hermann Hesse. I have read all his books, and I remember reading Daimon. And there's another book called Morgenfahrt, I think, which told me that he was a very, very advanced soul, and very careful how he worded it. So you are getting in the chat a lot of positive feedback. So I'm opening the participants list now so I can see who would like to ask a question or make a comment. Please raise your hand. JD, you are first. Go ahead.
Dominic, tremendous. I don't understand a lot of all the work that you've done, but it's amazing. So yeah, like Gwen said, hope you can split it up and share more with us down the stream. I had two questions. That Daimon's always been a term that confused me, because I found it in the Gospel of Judas, where Jesus called him the 13th Daimon, and then also I've noticed that in a lexicon that I have, that they were considered the souls of men who had actually been alive during a golden age and came back to be supporters or deities for mankind to their benefit. Have you had those kind of insights at all? Thank you.
I have. I've come across in some of my research where it was mentioned that a soul that lives a good life will come back. Almost the next evolution will be a daimon or will be a guardian angel in the next life. It's the next step. And thinking about that introspectively, it makes sense. Just as we have on the mortal plane, we have humans who don't try all that hard. There's got to be daimons that, I even came across in some literature where they had mentioned that they believe the daimons actually were able to feel some levels of pain in order to really tie them into the human that they were guiding. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. Absolutely.
Okay. Before I call on Gwen and Alex and Adrian, I just want, Gwen said, this is so much excellent material. I would hope you could break it down into sections for future workshops. Patricia said, thank you so much, Dominic, for this intellectually stimulating and spiritually nourishing talk. Rosie said, Journey to the East by Hesse. That's the Morgenfahrt. Thank you, Rosie. We both read it, I remember. Christine said, great presentation. Deborah said, what an amazing, lovely presentation. Loved it. Just loved it, full of hope and joy of who we are. And Layla said, excellent collection of research on the Daimon. Loved the way you stitched your tapestry of understanding together. Yes, that's, I couldn't have said it better. Gwen is next, then Alex and Adrian and Christine. Go ahead, Gwen.
Well, first I wanted to address the excellent, of course, I'm so proud. The thing is, what you just said about, well, now I can't even remember, but anyway, so I'm going to say what I think religiosity has done a tremendous damage to the daimon, and I pronounce it Daimon, but the whole idea of dogma and religiosity interferes with exactly what you were talking about as we come through. So in the suffering, this is what I wanted to say. When you said that the daimon can suffer, I think the suffering comes when religiosity interferes with the daimon, with our own understanding. I know that in the Mahatmas, the suffering of the Mahatmas is when we put all these concepts and dogma on top of these beliefs. And Jung was famous at saying, I don't believe, I know, which is the basis of gnosis and Gnostic thought. So I hope eventually that people will stop trying to crystallize their dogma and allow things to come in without some kind of judgment, which all religiosity seems to do. So thank you so much, Dominic.
I don't think you could have said it any better. When I read Bloom's diary, when he went through that, it's interesting. One of the things that really held him together was the Mahatma letters. He was reading those when he was in his downtime between praying. It has done so much damage, and it's unique. And even among the Jungians, you have Jungians who are just focused on Philemon. We've talked about this before, Gwen, instead of on their own. And you need to let it come through the way it's going to come. There's magical rituals to do this. There's different rituals to do this. Jung did this through active imagination. There's many ways to do this. This can be done through study. This can be done through praying, a lot of different things.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Adrian, you're next. I hope I didn't lower anybody's hand. If I did, I think I just did Gwen's. Go ahead, Adrian.
Dominique, all of my colleagues are going to address all the profound work that you've been doing, and I too have been impressed that I will look at this again. You've touched, as Gwen said, so many things, and I have a follow-up on Gwen also made a very minor point, and my point is very minor. You might even think it insignificant, but I want to share it with you. And Gwen said how she pronounces the word, and she elongated the second syllable, which is elongated in Greek. And it's not, the Greeks would not say diamond, and I know some philosophy classes say daimon, but it's theta, alpha, iota, and it's the theta is not a D sound, it's more like a th sound. So the word is Daimon. And I think, I was thinking the only way I could maybe make that important to you is to say your name is Dominique. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it, but it's like saying your name is Dominique. And you might come back and say, hey, Adrian, it's not Dominic or Dominic, it's Daimon. And maybe in your ongoing presentations, we can bring back the Greek, get closer to the sounds, because sounds are very important. And just saying diamond, it might be confused for some of our listeners to think maybe it's the coal that's been crystallized. I loved your work. It's touching upon some of the research that I myself am doing with regard to the I, the self, and all of us are coming each week discussing the relationship of the exterior and interiority. So I applaud you. Thank you.
And I would like to address that. I agree with you. And one of the things, I don't know Greek, and maybe something in the future, I'm definitely interested in it. I agree that adds to this knowledge, and it is sacred, the pronunciations. One of the things I found in my research is that there are different Greek words for the daimon. It's translated differently. So not even the pronunciation, yes, but the translation. And this is important. I was going to add some parts of that in my presentation, but it started to get overboard. And to give Gwen some credit, Gwen was coaching me on some pronunciation that I didn't take. Thank you so much, Adrian. I agree.
Okay. I wanted to read what Veronica said. I like the reference to Julian Jaynes, highly recognized in the works of Ian McGilchrist and on the two hemispheres. And Gwen said daimonic. Okay. Kristen, you are next, and then Linda.
Thank you. Hold on, let me get we go to Linda. I gotta switch my phone.
Okay, Linda, go ahead. You go first, and then Kristen. Go, Linda.
This is a wonderful talk, and I was reminded of something that happened. I'm in the Portland, Oregon TS Lodge, and years ago, I've been in this lodge a long time, and there was a woman who totally believed in spirit guides, and she had like a Native American, and she had an ancient Egyptian, and she had all these different spirit guides. And when she was on her deathbed, she had the realization that all of those were being projected from her higher self, because she had such a strong belief in spirit guides. That was the only way they could communicate with her. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, I would like to touch on that. My research, it's been replete with that. I mean, we didn't get to go into examples, but there are so many examples of the daimon and guidance throughout history. Joan of Arc is one prominent one. It came through as Archangel Michael to her because of the time period she lived in. I actually had a discussion with Kelly about this last night, that for that woman you were discussing, she really had those beliefs, but that is the only way it could connect. And going back to even some of the Monroe information, he had an Explorer series where they hooked up in his laboratory, and they had different entities come through, and they would tell him that they would choose the person by not only their energy, their frequency, their vibration, but also what they knew and how they could speak, what their knowledge base was. I think it's impossible to ignore that. And this goes back to what Gwen said too. We have to really let it become unfiltered, but that's so hard to do sometimes when we have such steeped belief systems. But I completely agree with you. And Linda, I want to touch something, use this as an opportunity to say something. So this is ongoing research for me, and I'm back in school studying psychology, and my project for my graduation is actually on this, and it's on guidance. So I would just like to mention, if there's anyone in this group or any of you know that has any kind of guidance they would be interested in doing an interview about, just a narrative, it's anonymous, please contact Suzanne, because I would love to add it to my research. And of anyone who has any type of guidance in any form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. This is this is a good topic, because I was wondering, it made me think about, lately it seems like a lot of people are voicing these experiences with, for another word, like aliens and interplanetary intelligence, and it seems to be kind of becoming more and more popularly accepted. And I've always thought that maybe that is related to this daimon, that maybe they are, like you were saying, maybe, I don't know. So I'm just putting that idea out there, because I just wonder if there's some connection here between people wanting to believe in interplanetary intelligence and feel like they've had visitations from other non-humans, if that's also part of this. I know Jung wrote the book on the UFOs, and I just feel like there's something connected in all that. I just wonder if you've ever thought about that.
I absolutely have. These are great points and great questions. I absolutely have. I've read things where they've said, before we were in a technological age, it was angels and demons that came through. And then now that we are in the age of science and technology, now it comes through as extraterrestrials. And I completely agree with your point, Kristen, that I do believe, this goes back to Linda and to Gwen, that it's filtered. And Jung said it in the letter to Hess, in some of those quotes. A lot of people can't handle it or don't know how to interpret it. So it grabs the closest thing that is in their awareness to come through. And right now it's coming through. We're in an age of science and technology and computers. It's extraterrestrials and abduction. But I think it's the same thing that we've always been dealing with. It's just changed by the age.
Thank you. Thank you for a great question, Kristen. Layla, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I was just typing into the chat that Arthur C. Clarke says that any technology advanced enough is indistinguishable from magic. So I think that's what you were just talking about. But I had raised my hand for another reason, which is my favorite painting that is currently at the Met is The Death of Socrates. And I wanted to share with you that in that painting, which was done by David right at the beginning of the French Revolution, was commissioned because it was the end of the age of frivolity. Everyone was so busy overspending and being, careless. And you think of Marie Antoinette when she said, like, let them eat cake. You know, there was just this huge disparity of consciousnesses and wealth, and kind of like mirroring what we're seeing right now in our society. And so the reason this painting was commissioned by the neoclassicists is because they wanted to reinstitute this higher, this connection to the daemon, really the higher power. And in that painting, you can see Socrates drinking the hemlock and pointing up to the sky. And that's his reference to, like, not a belief, but a complete knowing in the daemon, in that existence, and like not fearing the shedding of the immortal skin. And yeah, I just wanted to share that for you. I thought you might like that part of your research.
I probably really appreciate that, and I think that's a great detail. Socrates was so convinced. I mean, the example where I think it was even several times that he had an ability to escape, and one time it was very well organized. There was even ideas where he didn't even prepare for his court trial, and then he was even given preparations by some of his students. I think Crito was one of them, and he tossed them to the side. That's how much faith he had in the divine and in his Daimon. Thank you.
Before I ask your wife, Kelly, I just wanted to read. Gwen said, aliens terminology comes through your filters, especially in young people. And she said, filters are prevalent. It has to come through, like AI is coming into being. See all the judgments around that. We all have a veil through which we perceive our daemon, and that veil is full of associations and distortions of the true message coming from our daemon. Thank you for sharing.
And just to quickly elaborate on that, one of the predominant writers in that is Whitley Strieber, and he has told of some terrifying experiences and fearful experiences. But look at the age he existed in, and before that, he was a horror writer. He wrote The Hunger, The Wolven. So in his consciousness, something was coming through, but he had such a dark side to himself. It manifested in the age of technology and in some terrible abduction experiences.
Wow, thank you, Kelly. And then the last one will be Deborah. Go ahead, Kelly.
So just to sum what I got from your presentation, and that my understanding also is that the daimon or is also the higher self, and it sits in our soul. It's part of our soul, but it's a higher part of our soul, because our soul is divided in three. And as we develop as a consciousness, we can expand more our body or raise our vibration, where we can bring more into our physical body, the presence of our higher self. Is that?
No, that's spot on. Even more than that, like what some of the and it's more than one who in the magical ritual, and they made the comment that it sits when literally they saw it. Not only did it speak, but that's where it even came. It entered from above, or if they were laying down when they had the experience, it was beyond their head. Like it's actually in that space. And if you look to some of the wisdom traditions, when they talk about meditation, they talk about focusing up here. And what do we have up here? We have the crown chakra. So it's really focusing on that point, the point of connection. Yeah, no, excellent.
Right.
Thank you. And that was a very nice summary. And Gwyn said, astrologically, the daemon comes through the north and the south nodes and is recognized in esoteric astrology. And then we have Deborah Smith. Deborah, go ahead. Deborah?
Sorry. Yeah, just an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I really liked how you brought in the Gnostics and Jung, and there's a Gnostic bishop, you probably know him, Stephen Heller, who's kind of interpreted in many of his lectures Jung's presentation on the daemon and on Philemon through a Gnostic lens. And I don't understand a lot of it, but it's just amazing. The other thing was your description of free will. I'd never heard it talked about the way you did. I'd love to hear more. And then just the last little comment I'll make is that when you talked about, at some point in our past, a couple of thousand years ago, whatever, we got very close to something that might have freed us, and then something come in to dampen, to suppress, to hide that. And I think the same thing is happening today. When you look around the world at the return to fundamentalism and against freedom of thought and speech and religion, that the same thing is starting to happen. So just if you have any thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear more from you. Over.
Thank you. And I think that it appears to me that there was a procedure to actually initiate this contact that was very close, and it really got taken away with Christianity coming in, the libraries being burned. This knowledge, like I said, it went to the Sufis and to Arabia and to Persia. It was, some of it was recompiled by the Golden Dawn, but it was still so marginalized. I agree with you too that what's amazing now is this is all out there, but it's an open secret. But there's so much distraction in the world. It's almost like, okay, now we're going to let you have it. You can practice, you can do this, but we are going to give you so many forces of distraction that only a few of you in small groups are going to be able to do it. I agree. I'll go and go out to lunch somewhere, and I make this comment sometimes. I'll see a group of people come in, and none of them will utter a word. They will all be on their phones. They won't even talk to each other. And there's so much influence, so much distraction. Now, Gwen mentioned AI. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it's really going to take a conscious effort to unplug yourself, or in the Gurdjieffian work, the shock, becoming self-aware, some of the exercises in the different traditions. It's going to take a lot of practical application, and I think there's going to be small groups of us that will do this. I also think the onus is really on us to share this information and to teach others, to try to wake them up and pull them out of the illusion. Thank you.
Okay, before I go to Sonia and Alex, Gwen, I think Christine said distraction is a type of veil, and Gwen agreed, a very impermeable veil in this day and time. Go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you so much. It was very great talk. And I just want to tell you, I grew up in the Soviet Union, no religions allowed, but I had some experience I want to discuss. I don't want to take right now so much time, but if it is possible to communicate through Suzanne or Rosie, or we can exchange emails, and I will maybe tell you about this experience.
I would definitely welcome that. And what's so interesting, just quickly, just listening to the little bit that you said, almost like we've been talking, there's so much distraction in the dogma and in the other religions. You grew up in a place that had a vacuum of that. So it's almost like it was an experience that was available because there was nothing. I would be very interested to talk to you.
Thank you.
I will connect the two of you. I will send an email with CC. No worries. Thank you, Sonia. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Dominique. Good to see you again. Yes, I just wanted to comment that distractions, we listed all the great spiritual and historical lights that talked about the Daimon and the higher self and so on. They were very few, right? In those societies, they had slaves, they had the masses of people that were subjected. Only very few took this knowledge and followed it. It's the same today. So I think the point is that it's not how many do it. In every age, there's an opportunity for soul growth in every age. And in every age, very few will take that opportunity. Partly because the ego and the self, in Jung's terminology, are always in conflict, right? So they always want to keep their own domain and control their own atmosphere and their own environment. And the ego is not likely to give up its power to the higher self unless it has to. But we can talk about the great lights of history, and thank goodness they were there. And you're absolutely right. Today, everything is wide open. We're not being burned at the stake for meeting and talking about these things, which we were in the past. But certainly, only few of us even then did it, and only few of us now do it. Even with liberty and freedom, people are not free. They're bound by their own, as Gwen calls them, filters. So we always have this with us. And the veils, the veils between the personality and the soul, and the Kabbalah, they should talk about the veils, Paraketh and so on. The veils are always there. And it's up to each of us individually in any particular life that we choose to do it, because we have many lives when we do not choose to do it. It's available. It will always be available because that's the nature of man. But certainly, it's not prevalent among the masses of people. It has never been, and maybe far in the future it may be, but certainly now it's not, just like it wasn't in the past. Thank you for the great talk, Dominique.
You're welcome. What I would just like to add to that is I agree with you, except where I say it got very close before. I mean, that story from Porphyry, I believe that, where they went in Rome to the temple of Isis, and that Egyptian priest knew how to pull out the diamond, which ended up being a god of Plotinus. How many places do we know that we could go right now to have our diamond pulled out? I mean, this is stuff that was, even though there was a few that did it, it was there. And I think it was there in a form that it got close enough where there wasn't the distractions. There wasn't all the shiny things. Yes, there was distractions. There's always been distractions. But I think it got really close to where you could go to a temple, you could study something, you weren't constantly inundated by your phone, the TV, all these things. It got to a point where there could have been a fork, there could have been a shift, and it was not supposed to occur. I have my own theories. I think possibly the world, not even necessarily conspiratorial with the church. I think science needed to evolve more. I think things needed to be built out in a matter perspective. Some of the great works of engineering and medicine and different things that might have been overlooked, and if we had gone such a way, there's a lot of different reasons. But thanks, Alex.
Well, anybody else? If I inadvertently turn everybody's hand down, please raise it now. Otherwise, I just would like to thank you so much, Dominic. This was an outstanding talk, very informative. And as Adrian said, I will have to watch it again. I'm so glad you took the time to come and answer all the questions. And I will contact you because we can do this talk unlisted or public. So you let me know how you feel about that.
You're welcome to do it public, and thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you everyone for listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and I hope to see you next week. I have it in my head, but I think, hold on a second, just because I don't want to give you the wrong information. I think it's a young, another young theosophist from Wheaton, who some of you might know. Next week is the 16th. It's Oneness, Our Only Hope with Justin Tanksley, and I hope you can join us. And with that, goodbye. Have a great week, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.